Thank you to our friends of the Waccamaw Library. Diane Stern, our president, our wonderful president, is there in the very back. But let's give her a big round of applause, because they make this First Thursday series go, and pretty much all our activities and programs here at the Waccamaw Library. So, and including the wonderful surroundings, the big backyard. You can go out and check out that. It's a beautiful day out back. So the FOWL Center, the Friends Center right there across the way. So they're instrumental to keeping this library beautiful and booming. So thanks to FOWL, as always. This program is sponsored as well by South Carolina Humanities, so we want to say thank you so much to them, a nonprofit that shares inspiring, engaging, and enriching programs on literature, history, culture, and heritage. They're endowed by the National Endowment for the Humanities, and their slogan is "Democracy Demands Wisdom." And we'll get a lot of wisdom today from our wonderful speaker, Ann-Chadwell Humphries, who's come down from Columbia, South Carolina, to be with us today. And she is a wonderful poet, as well as a literary researcher. We'll hear her from her researching skills today about a treasure of South Carolina literary history and history in general, cultural history, Julia Mood Peterkin. So we're thrilled to have Ann-Chadwell Humphries with us, thanks to South Carolina Humanities, because she's one of the South Carolina Humanities Speaker Bureau's speakers. And we also have with us today as special guest Amy and Laura Peterkin. So this is quite a treat. These are Julia Mood Peterkin's great granddaughters. So let's give them a big round of applause. That's terrific to have them on board with us today and sharing in this wonderful event. And Ann brought with her a wonderful display of items here from Julia Mood Peterkin, our Pulitzer Prize-winning author from the state of South Carolina. So we are having a little technical issues with our big screen today, so we have our display over here on a smaller screen, so we'll kind of crane our necks this way and watch the slideshow as we go forward here. But without further ado, we'll bring up the wonderful Ann-Chadwell Humphries, Game Changer, The Life and Writings of Julia Peterkin.
All right, is that the length of somebody over there, or is it narrower?
No, it's wider.
It's wide.
There
Okay.
you go.
All right. Thank you all for coming. And Amy and Laura and Jimmy, thank you for coming. I have to confess, I'm very biased about this author. She excites me so much. And I no longer see with my eyes. It's a rogue gene over time has diminished my vision. It's the opposite of macular. But I had time to prepare, and I've taken courses adapting to blindness. You can call me a sage if you'd like, or an oracle. It has advantages, actually. I have a cane, a white cane. It puts me at the front of the line every time. So, and I have one of those princess parking placards. We're right up front for the handicap. We don't call it handicap placard. We call it the princess parking. Okay. I want to tell you a story as much as I can, deepest in my soul, about the blazing hot talent that we have had in our state in the name of Julia Mood Peterkin. I've read Scarlet Sister Mary 6 times. The first time warning, if you have read it, any of her work, would you say yes or yes or yes or? Yes. Okay, I hope we have some fans. And it needs to have maybe adult warning a little bit, because it's not the profanity, it's not that. It's just like, wow, those things she wrote about to me in such a respectful way. And at the time, so she was born in 1880. I'm going to tell you a little bit about a biographical background, but I'm also going to concentrate on her literary skill, which to me remains fresh. We have some slides, and then we have volunteered a man named Jimmy Williams to read excerpts. I want you to hear how she describes the land, the building, there might be some in people. There are lots of places tagged in my book, and he can choose which ones he would like to read. I had so Julia Mood Peterkin was born on October 31st, 1880 in Lawrence County. And is the Friends of the Library president still here? Diane? Yes. Okay, so my parents were Friends of the President. My parents were Friends of the Library presidents. My parents were Friends of the Library presidents in Lawrence County, and when they moved back to Texas, they were actively involved. So, soft place in my heart for the Friends of the Library. Also, last year, you all hosted the 5 Poets Laureate of the state at the Conference Center in Columbia for the annual meeting, so I got to go and see my friends, Poets Laureate of different cities around town and regions. South Carolina has a thriving poetry community, and we support each other. Okay, so Julia Mood Peterkin, let's have the slides. I understand they're over there. I'm just gonna take you through the slides at the beginning. I feel privileged, Amy and Laura. Thank you for having me on your land. For the audience, I was on land contiguous to their Lang Syne plantation. What do you call it, a farm now? Or do you call it plantation? A farm, that's what I thought. A farm. I was on land contiguous, Friends of the Congaree, and their bluffs along there. There's something mesmerizing to me about that land. And this is in Calhoun County, and the crops that you go this time of year, and the distances that you see. So I felt this land and this affinity for Julia Peterkin through my feet and kind of up. It's kind of like roots growing. Okay, so I was able to go to their church. What is that, Billy? Did I introduce you? This is my friend Billy Muthig. She's prompting me. She's a wonderful friend. That's okay. This is her tombstone at St. Matthew's Episcopal Churchyard, and her husband, who is, they called Willie Peterkin, right? Willie Peterkin. And they were married in 1903. And Julia was an educated woman. She was the third of 3 daughters. Her mother died when she was 2. And by the way, I'm a lay historian. I'm not a scholar. I read what I can get access to and try to cross-reference. So I may not have everything completely accurate, but I hope you'll respect the spirit with which I speak about her. All right, so I was able to go to that cemetery, and their church was there. Okay, Julia was the third of 3 daughters, and her father was an OBGYN who eventually moved to Sumter County. And all right, what's the next one?
This is Mary Weeks.
Okay, so Julia marries Willie Peterkin, and Julia is educated from Converse with a master's in comparative literature. She comes to Fort Mott, we'll show you on a map here in a minute, Little Fort Mott to teach at the white school. And Willie's sister sent him to pick her up from the train station, and she was tall and redheaded and freckles, and he didn't think so much of her at first, and now they married. But now
Lavinia is on there too.
Yeah, so she gets on this plantation, which is what it was called then, it's a farm now. She's one of 5 or 6 white people among 500 people who came with the property or descendants of what had been the property. My best guess are people who've come in. There was a main street, Amy told me, she showed me kind of where the main street was. But Julia came and she didn't know what her job was to be, but these 2 women who kind of worked in the house, Julia said befriended her, but and Julia had a baby. She had a very difficult labor, so her father, who delivered her, asked Willie, do you want to put your wife through this again? And he said no. Well, I'm sure they discussed it. But they took out her ovaries, which was not an uncommon thing back then, but it's against the law now. So that when Julia woke up, she had a new baby, and she might have had normal postpartum depression, but she also did not have a mother. She was on this plantation by herself, and she had to face that she could no longer have children. So she went into a depressive mode, understandably, and kind of withdrew. And these 2 women, I understand, are the ones that helped her learn the ways of the plantation, like how to make wine, how to plant, rotate crops. See, this is when you're close to the land. Your feet are in dirt. Some of these people's feet are in dirt. You're close to the land. You feel the livestock. You feel the game. You feel wind, and there are no mechanized sounds. Let me take you back to 1920 or so. And you're out here, and they're oxen or mule-drawn wagons being used not just here, but around this area, around South Carolina. And so you might hear traces, but I want to emphasize the closeness to the land, because things happen when you live close to the land. And things happen to your pets, to your working animals, they happen to people, sawing accidents. It's kind of a brutal, many ways, it's a dangerous way of life. So different from what ours is. Now granted, Julia was the, quote, mistress, but she got out there, in my opinion, and what I saw, and she was willing to learn how to make, how to do, how to cut, how to plant. And she eventually she bred exotic fowl, but also she was good with crops. And her husband, Willie, was also good. So these 2 women, Mary Weeks and Lavinia, what's the last name?
Mary.
Yeah. Sort of befriended her. And she was 1903. Julia, and they taught her all these things and brought her out. And so then Julia began to mingle with the white population and society of women in Fort Mott. And that's also the space where Rebecca Mott, there's a Revolutionary War battle that was there. It's worth your time to visit. It's mesmerizing. Okay, so Julia decided she wanted to take, these women are buried. One is not buried. We don't know where quite the other one is, but one, so they called her Venner instead of Lavinia or Lavina. And Mary Weeks, this book, Scarlet Sister Mary, is very loosely based on that character. All right, next. And they would say, Miss Julia made a lot of this stuff up, but good for her. All right, go ahead. What's next?
You and the bust and a letter written by her. You and the bust.
Okay, so and Amy invited me into their house where she lived, where her grandmother had lived. And now imagine being famous enough to have a bust made for you. And so I got to really feel her face and her hair. And That is very meaningful. And do you all have a typewriter of hers?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know, because she was such a big correspondent. And I didn't know if she wrote the letters, which is why I put her handwriting in here, or if she typed the letters, or a little bit of both. Do you know?
She did type.
Type the letters?
Copies of some letters she typed, and then mostly she handwrite letters.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was
Okay, all right, next. What's this one?
He hadn't gotten it up yet. Dan, this is the map.
Okay, you see where Fort Mott is? Have any of you been to Calhoun County? I know, Amy, you lived there, so and Laura, you would be from. Jimmy, have you been to there?
Oh, indeed.
Okay, because you were Tom's friend.
That's right.
Yeah, who was Amy's husband, tragically died this past year. The land, that house is there, but the land has changed. In the book, you read about some of the locations, but so this is the house from the outside that Julia and Willie lived in, and where Amy resides. And sometimes, don't you have a twin sister?
I did.
Sometimes there. And Laura, you, okay. Let me tell you about the people who went across the threshold of that. Carl Sandburg, Katharine Hepburn. She was friends with Sinclair Lewis, Aaron Copland, Edward Arlington Robinson, Ethel Barrymore, Dorothy Dandridge. And after her second book, she was a commodity on New York. People knew her. They sought her out. They could tell who she was. She's walking on the street, and there's a section in one of her biographies. She says, "I want these people to leave me alone." Because they went by train. She would go by train, and so people would pop up. There's one account that Langston Hughes might have visited. And again, I'm not the scholar to completely verify. She ran with H.L. Mencken. W.E.B. Du Bois said, this is Harlem Renaissance time, very robust culturally. But Julia wrote of reality. She wrote the inner thoughts of the people's head, and she also had to learn to get herself out of the book. If she put herself in the book, it was not nearly as effective fiction. She wrote a series of short stories. Okay, keep going. Did she have an office in that room, or she had a little studio, didn't she?
She had a little writing cabin.
Yeah, writing cabin. Okay.
But we found the spot where it was, and it's kind of a neat little spot.
Mm-hmm. And over 100 years, buildings change. I think you've moved some buildings down the road. So
Some have just fallen down.
yeah, some have just fallen down. I mean, that's just life. Okay.
This is Julia and her husband.
Okay, there they are on their wedding day. Note where he plants his hair. Isn't it down the middle? Isn't that cute? All right, so what's next?
This is the Hepburn family and the
Okay.
and Revolver.
All right, this is Katharine Hepburn and her mother and sister spent time there. That's pretty high company. And they were going to the Ellery races. Ellery, pardon me? Okay. Utahville, thanks. Starts with it. All right, keep going.
This is the house.
Inside?
Outside.
What was the one above it? Oh, isn't that a house?
No, the other one was the leopard coat.
Oh, excuse me, that jazzy, sorry, I got mixed up on my phone. That jazzy leopard coat and the revolver, I think that says a lot about who she was. Somebody the other day, I'm taking a writing class again at the university. This is creative nonfiction. And one of the questions for the icebreaker is like, who do you admire? And I thought afterward, I didn't say anything I answered another question, but I admire Julia Mood Peterkin. I really do, for what she did at the time that she did it and the confidence with which she did it. Even though she was doubtful of herself, she's put herself out there and she broke norms of gender and race that we appreciate to this day. All right, that's the house, the exterior. All right, keep going.
This is the grand piano.
Okay, that grand piano is still in there. So Julia was going to take piano lessons. It did take piano lessons. She would take the train from Fort Mott into Columbia and to Chicora College, which was, I think, a Presbyterian college. I can't exactly say where it was, but you hear that name around Columbia. One of our sons lives at the corner of Chicora and Wofford Avenue in that section of Columbia. But it was for women, and so Julia arranged to take piano lessons up there. But she enchanted the professor so much with her stories of Lang Syne that he said, you should write those down. So she started writing down. She didn't start writing till she was 41. You know, there's still hope for late bloomers. Oh my gosh. Now, she was an educated and well-read person. Okay, what's next? But that grand piano, I got to touch that grand piano. She sat at that grand. And I like that interior of, see the upholstery on the chair. Am I looking the right way?
Yes.
And the lamp, I just love that, the black and white. Okay, next.
This is the Three Black Women in Uniforms and Wallace Hayward.
Okay, so these might be Mary and Lavinia, might be, and then in the uniforms, and that could be Wallace. I think it was Hayward, one of her cooks who came from down here. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And he had some kind of deformity, which is written about his, but other people's birth, this is the right word, deformities, which could be corrected maybe these days, but were not at those times. By the way, this man came to her they had a summer place. Julia, through her father, was related to the Alstons. And they had a place down by Brook Green Garden. Is it that way? No, it's back that way, isn't it? Okay. And so they used it for hunting, but in the 20s, 1923, it was heavily mortgaged, and their group chose to sell it to the people from the north who were coming down and buying a lot of this land for also hunting. You know those people around here, the Baruchs and the Vanderbilts and Huntingtons, those people. But fortunately, they've put conservation easements on that land, and it's natural to this day. Yawkey, Tom Yawkey. Okay, so what is that one?
Next. Yeah, that one. Next one. Okay, this is men and women in the fields. We
Okay,
have the oxen drawn cart, and then people.
all right, an
cry.
ox. The reason I bring an ox up at this point is that Julia and her husband and her father would come by train to Georgetown. Then they would take a boat, according to one account, and then they would take an ox cart, an oxen, to their place where it was the old Alston. And it's wherever Brook Green or Oak, whatever those Spring Hills, whatever those are named these days. I was telling Amy, in this book, the author fictionalizes a lot of things, and she does make up stories and exaggerate it, but it's so cunningly done. And the name of her property, which is fictionalized, was Blue Brook. You see where she got it from? Brook Green. And she would do that with some existing characters. She had a pair of twins in the book named June and July. They had one of her sister Mary's offspring was unexpected, so they called him Onyx. There's someone named Champagne. There's a man named April. All kinds of unusual names, and it's interesting how Julia writes about their customs, their superstitions. Okay, what else?
And then the people in the field. And then the next slide is the lady sitting on the stoop.
Okay, this is a stoop.
And then the lady with the tub on her head.
Okay, and that was a controversial picture. Because I can't remember, I couldn't tell if that were Mary Weeks. It doesn't have two grandchildren in it, does it?
No, these
Okay, so that's what led me to believe it might not be. Mary Weeks did carry water, and in the book, Scarlet Sister Mary, those of you who've read it, the main character carries water as a child, going down to the creek, carry the water. First she could carry this size bucket, and then she put 2 full buckets and a bucket on her head and would walk up. But that you could look out from their house and see this, and that would be an example of where the black people lived, on a stoop. And she writes lovingly, actually, about that throughout her book, Scarlet Sister Mary, about where she grew up. The main character is an orphaned girl who grows up with an older woman like this in a cabin much like this, but when she marries, she goes to her husband's, July's, place, and she spoke lovingly when she left. Okay, move on.
It's 20 minutes, and this is a picture of two barns. The barns.
Okay, this is an example of the barns. I'm not sure when these pictures were taken, but it was a working farm. They grew asparagus and corn and soybeans, and this, I don't know if they had electricity, but a lot of people did not have electricity. 1920s, not the teens, 1920s. I think Julia or Willie had a car, they had a car, but we're talking really primitive, close to the land, no electricity, very little electricity, okay. And the barns, just show you it's a working farm. So they had mules and oxen and horses, and they had hunting horses. Okay, next.
And these are the books.
Okay, all right, thanks. That does it for the slides. It kind of helps guide me. Lest you not these books are about or were written by Julia Mood Peterkin. Billy, will you come up and read some of them? 100 of them.
You want Jimmy? Oh, you want the names of the
Billy,
books?
would you read some of the books?
Let's see. We have.
Or
Let's see. Devil and a Good Woman Too.
that's a biography.
There's the Plantation Christmas.
That was a bestseller.
Setting the Supper Table.
That was an exhibit put on in Columbia about famous South Carolina women, and artists created a table setting. I don't know if any of you were able to do it. Eliza Lucas Pinckney is in there, Althea Gibson, Eartha Kitt, famous South Carolina women, Sarah Leverett, my friend. But it's just the fact that she's in that book and in that exhibit makes me very happy. All right?
South Carolina Women, They Dared to Lead.
Yep. Can you hear that all right?
Sorry. Bright Skin.
That is her fourth novel. It's about the color of skin, where we have white blood coming in.
Black April.
That one was her first book was Green Thursday, and it was a series of short stories. Black April was her first novel, and I read where someone thought it could have been tied for the Pulitzer with some Sinclair Lewis, and let me think, it's escaping my mind who, some of the other four, but somebody else won out. But it was right up there. See, that's the quality, all right?
Henry.
Henry?
Henry.
Okay, I don't know that book.
She wrote that one.
Oh, okay.
The Passionate Mind.
All right.
Studies including Julia Peterkin's A Souvenir.
She's a study of dissertations. She's the study of scholars, but she's underrated. She's so underrated. Go ahead.
The Darkness and the Light.
Okay.
That's photographs. I have a magazine called South Carolina Women's, a timeline.
Okay.
Come out of profiles, the South Carolina Encyclopedia, and a book called Julia Peterkin.
There's a documentary about her, very short, on ETV.
Okay. And
Okay.
I think that was it.
Okay. All right. So she starts writing down these short stories because her piano professor said she should. So she does. And she takes a correspondence course. So she teaches herself. Although, again, she got a good education from Converse. And she also took a short story class, as a grown woman, even as a mother. She went to Winthrop. I'm not exactly sure the dates, but she went to Winthrop, lived in a dorm. And I think it was after maybe Green Thursday. That is about killdeer, which sounds like the bird killdeer. But in that, she writes about cleaning someone's foot. And it's this macabre. This is before Flannery O'Connor, but this is in the genre. And the toes coming off, because it's gangrenous. She wrote in there about a baby born without a mouth. Whether that was true or not, we don't know, but it represents what women could talk about at that time. They were not to draw attention to themselves. They were not to voice opinions. They were not sexual people. They were not considered sexual beings, you know. She wrote about, and this apparently was true, a rooster that pecked out the eyes of an infant. There's burning in there. So those are the harsh reality of what she wrote, but it's done so well. Also, Julia Peterkin, before she started writing, well, maybe it was continuous, concomitant at the same time, was in a play at Town Theater, if you all know Columbia. So she was in a play and she got standing O's for being in that play as a community theater. She took herself by train up to Columbia, and so she's on stage. And she had good reviews. In that, she met a woman who used to write with Carl Sandburg. So this is the chutzpah that I like about it. She wrote Carl Sandburg, who was coming down to the Poetry Society of South Carolina. We have a great poetry society. Was coming down to speak there when he was a troubadour before he was really big, with his guitar, and he would sing and tell stories. So she knew he was coming, and she wrote him and said, "I'd love for you to stop by Lang Syne." And she was persistent. And they became very good friends. And the first time she wrote him, he didn't really respond, and she wrote back, "It is not polite for someone to not respond when somebody's been when a lady is taking care to send you her work, her writing." So he did respond, and they became really close. And it was Carl Sandburg who put her in touch with H.L. Mencken, who was at the time the nation's most harsh critic. You all might have read about him, but he was a literary giant at that time. And Mencken helped her get with Knopf publishers for her books. I mean, that's like jumping the line, like, wow. But she had that kind of talent. Okay. Now I'm going to ask Jimmy to read a selection.
So this is from Scarlet Sister Mary. And keep in mind that this is the voice of a black woman, so give me a little bit of...
You picked one with dialect?
Well, sure. I mean, the whole thing is her.
Oh, yeah, okay.
In the foreword to this, Julia Peterkin wrote to H.L. Mencken in 1921, "I shall never write of white people, their lives are not so colorful."
Yeah.
So we'll start with that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The earth's richness and the sun's warmth make living an easy thing. Years go by without leaving a mark or a footprint. Sometimes black years come and determined to break the tranquil monotony. Earthquakes tumble down chimneys, storms break trees and houses, floods wash the earth so bare that its very bones are exposed. Droughts burn up crops and weeds with impartial cruelty. But the old plantation is swift to hide every scar made by all this wickedness. New chimneys are quickly built and houses mended. The trees thrust up young branches to fill empty spaces. New crops and weeds thrive under gentle rains and hot sunshine. Life fills and enfolds everything here, never overlooking in the press of work to be done the smallest or most insignificant creature, and silently, with wearless patience and diligence, strange miracles are wrought as youth rises out of decay and death and becomes only another beginning. That's
nice.
how she ends chapter 1.
Yeah, and it was chapter 1. That was a nice reading. Good job.
Thank you.
While you're up here, go ahead and pick another one. Wasn't that gorgeous about the land? I don't know, and it's regular language, and she uses long sentences. It's just amazing to me. Go ahead.
And to begin chapter 5, she talks about the night. Night had fallen. Trees, houses, roads, fields were all melted into one darkness with a clear starlit sky far above them. The house where sinners went for pleasure was flooded with blood-red light from the great fire in the front yard. The place seethed with life, for crowds of people were weaving back and forth from the yard where great pots of victuals, or victuals, were cooking, to the room where the dance was going on. Some of them were singing, some clapping their hands as they marked time to the tune with which one lone fiddle squeaked out gaily to the booming beat of the big bass drum. The dance room was parked full, the door jammed with onlookers. And then here's some dialect that I can't even begin to do because I just don't have that voice.
Do you want to skip it?
Yeah, I'll skip that and
Okay.
go to chapter 8.
All right, yeah, I get it.
I'm not good at dialect, except my own. The short winter passed quickly, and before Mary knew it, spring had come. The old black plum tree beside her door hid its knotty black branches with soft white blossoms, which became thicker and sweeter hour by hour as the sunshine gathered strength. And when the honeybees climbed in and out of them, showers of fragrant petals were scattered around the old tree's foot. The crabapple thickets were masses of soft pink. The birds, which had gone away for the winter, had come home, and they were picking out nesting places. Tender green leaves screened a brown nest in the fig tree where a mockingbird laid its eggs. The woods and the hedgerows were alive with bird chatter. The woodpeckers and the jays and the redbirds scolded and fussed among themselves noisily. Hummingbirds fluttered in and out of the red woodbine. A wren chose her last year's home in the knothole at one side of Mary's door. A bluebird used her same nesting place in the corner post of the garden fence. Larks hopped about the fields and in the roads, and the doves mourned tenderly. Squirrels chased each other up and down the trees. The hens cackled up and down the length of the street, telling of new laid eggs, and cocks cackled back in loud encouragement. Yellow jasmines in full blossom made treetop gay and fragrant as new leaves pushed the old ones off the boughs, and the wind scattered them in the brown showers over the new grass. The old oaks tasseled out. The pines sowed their winged seeds, and the whole earth was full of birthing and growth.
See, thank you. That's great. Hold on to that book. We'll see how our time is.
Cool.
If you would. Thank
Yeah.
you. Very cool. And Billy's going to let me know when I have 20 minutes.
Yeah, you bet, you're at 35 minutes.
Okay, I still have a little time. So she started sending with the encouragement of Carl Sandburg and H.L. Mencken, and Mencken focused her to Knopf and some other literary magazines. So her work started to be publicized. And then she wrote Green Thursday, the series of essays, and that got some acclaim. And then she wrote Black April, which is more of a novel, and that is about a man named April and his wife Rose, and it talks about his life, and you see how close they are to nature. I don't know if you know where the wren nested last year. My mother would have known that, and I would have known it if I could see it, but where things were, just noticing such specifics where in our world we're moving really fast, but out in that land, you have to pay attention. And they're also shooting game and fishing for food, and they're growing their own crops. They use poison, and the boll weevil comes in the 1920s, and the plantation, according to one biographer, was on hard times, and Julia's stories and the money that she would make would pull them through. That's what one of the biographers had said, and supplemented. But she was not liked, she was not appreciated, she was scorned by a lot of her peers because she was famous and because she was accomplished and she was out in front of people and she traveled a lot. As I said, she could walk on the streets of New York City and some people would recognize her and ask for an autograph, and then they bombarded her at her house and go away, go away. All right, so that was Green Thursday, Black April, and in the Pulitzer, which is the only Pulitzer written by a South Carolina to this day, She won in 1929. And it came out after, I think it came out right about the time of the crash. So that had a devastating effect, but that book sold a whole lot. And she ended up going on lectures and tours. She had an honorary doctorate bestowed upon her. Ethel Barrymore wanted to star in the Broadway play. The Ethel Barrymore of the Barrymore family. Drew Barrymore is maybe grandmother, grandaunt, or whatever. And she insisted on playing Scarlet Sister Mary, but the problem was they did it in blackface. And there was more interest in the lives of black people during that time. Again, I said W.E.B. Du Bois and Walter White of the NAACP, and I told you Langston Hughes had a great respect for her. So the people in the black community, literati community, did respect her and admired. And some of the things that were being written were about the parlor romances with beaux and belles, by some of the white people. And some of the white people would write a cruder dialect. Julia wrote something that could be read aloud. It wasn't exactly on point, but it was something that could be read and understood. And if you listen around here, you'll probably hear that same gullah by white and blacks in their dialects. I love it. So then she's a Pulitzer Prize winner, and now she's going all over the country. And then Dorothy Dandridge, the movie star, the black movie star, wanted to star in the movie Scarlet Sister Mary. The plot of Scarlet Sister Mary is about this young woman, Mary, who orphaned, grew up with this older woman, and her son who was crippled, disabled, and living on the farm and working the farm and doing the laundry and doing the cooking and some sewing and weaving. And there was a community, like a little town there, and you could go commissary and they could buy fabrics, or they could buy overalls or from Mr. Peterkin right there. But everything is so hands-on. All the fire is built with wood. It is chopped down. It is put in splinters. That's all hand done. The bread is baked. They process the flour. They might get the flour, but that's just a couple of steps from baking the bread. Right there. They were not literate people, although their houses were papered with newspapers, but they didn't read. That was the custom then. They didn't teach them to read. Some, not all, some. Except, here's the cool thing, so Eleanor Roosevelt had invited Julia for lunch. This is in the 40s, because Mrs. Roosevelt wanted to have Julia be the head of the Democratic Party in the state for FDR's reelection, but Julia declined. But she said, while you're at it, I want you to build a school for the black children down on the farm. And doggone it, if she didn't, as a school standing to this day, I've been in that school. You just walk in it and the memories of, and they had big classes too, and the kids were walking from wherever they lived. I don't know whether that invited people from other plantations to come. I'm not sure about that, but they wanted to learn too, obviously. So let's see what else.
We're at 40 minutes.
I'm at 40 minutes, okay. What questions might you have that I or Laura or Amy might be able to answer? She changed publishers. I just loved how she would advocate for herself. I don't think Willie, her husband, read her books. It doesn't seem like it, I don't know. They had that one child, Bill, who is the grandfather. Bill is who to you?
My grandfather.
Yeah, your grandfather, Bill. And so your father is who?
My dad was William George Peterkin as well. They called him William.
They called him William. Okay. Was he the fourth?
No, my brother was the fourth.
Your brother was the fourth, okay.
Right, I was the fourth.
All right. So there's still people who know the Peterkins and know different generations of the Peterkins around. Calhoun County has a wonderful historic museum, and there's some evidence of the Peterkins in that museum. You get a sense of the land and the economy and the crops and the entertainment and the transportation and the farming practices. I love small town museums. As a matter of fact, we went to Georgetown's History Museum yesterday, and we took the Waccamaw lady up the Waccamaw River the other day, and they were talking about the Waccamaw Neck, and that's alluded to in the book. That part where what he read is that, so the Northerners came to buy, and then some of the buildings went into disrepair or deteriorated, but there's a culture of a Black community that would sustain themselves, is what I understand, and kind of insulated from the regular world for a time. Did you all know, tell me yes or no, did you know someone of that stature was from South Carolina?
Yes.
You did know that?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. So you're fans already. But she's not really that well known, right?
Right.
She's not well known.
Just her name. Isn't that odd? Not her books, but her name.
Oh,
She's respected.
well, I recommend her books. All right. Any other questions or?
You know that it got banned in Gaffney, South Carolina?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm. It got banned other places. She had an opportunity to publish in Black newspapers or Black journals, but she declined. It was a big cost for her, a social cost for her. Eventually, she went back into her culture and her life, and she was caring for her son and then her grandson. And she just kind of eased out of the limelight, except she did publish that Plantation Christmas, which was a bestseller. It's that little book that was a bestseller. And she would write for some magazines as well. But she kind of tucked herself into that culture, went back to that.
Some South Carolinians did not appreciate.
Yeah.
Felt like it was stirring up stuff that didn't need to be stirred.
That stuff doesn't happen here. That doesn't happen here.
Well, it's because she was a woman.
That's another thing.
That was the big thing. Women were not supposed to talk about that.
Okay. All right, that's because she was a woman, that's true, and she, all right, what's the question, please?
Okay, my name is Betty. I think people know me. I'm a published writer, and I have to give you the back history. All I do, I know her so well, through her writing. I mean, I've read so much of her work.
Yeah.
And in my publication, I wrote Sandy Island. I helped preserve Sandy Island.
Did you?
Yeah, I was one of the preservationists at Sandy Island. But I want to make a long story short. Writing, when you get to be a good writer, you get to be a good writer because you read good writers. And Julia Peterkin was one of those writers, and I read a lot of her material. Genevieve Chandler was another writer, and Zora Neale Hurston was another writer that I read and learned to write. I got their voices. And I'm just going to make the quick story short. When I read her work, she's passed away. So I knew her through her writing. I never met her physically because she's already passed away. And one day I was in a restaurant and I met Amy.
Ow.
I met Amy
For a restaurant.
at a restaurant, her husband's restaurant.
Oh, the one between the antlers?
Yeah. And as soon as I met Amy, and I told Amy this, I knew she was Julia.
You knew she was what?
Julia.
She looks just like her.
Does she?
She's built exactly like
I
her.
had never met her, only read her writing, but when I met Amy, it was very haunting, because I know her voice, I know everything, and Amy's her voice.
That's so cool.
That's a real compliment.
Thank you.
Thank you for excellent biography.
Thanks for, is there anything else you would like to say, to tell us?
Jenny, you're so sweet.
Vinny, she saw the photograph. The photograph is a photographer I studied, and I ended up buying a 1930 camera.
Oh.
And the photographs was probably done by Doris Holman.
Yes, they were. They were. That came from Roll Jordan Roll.
So my full photography is duplicated from Doris Holman.
Oh, cool.
Where do you get the pictures of the people working the fields?
Artist. Denny's a
Yeah.
great artist.
She is, and she was great friends with my grandmother,
Oh, yeah.
Genevieve Peterkin.
Genevieve Peterkin.
Oh, Doris Ullman was?
Peterkin.
Yeah, I studied her mother's work on Genevieve Chandler. Genevieve Chandler. Yeah, I mean, I know.
Everybody knows her sister.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was our, she was
And
our
I'm
grandmother.
saying her mother, what's her mother?
Genevieve Wilcox Chandler.
Okay, Genevieve, yeah, I studied her right.
And combo.
This is Tom Mora.
She recorded my grandmother, Genevieve Wilcox Chandler, who was married, her daughter, Genevieve, was married to Bill Peterkin. That's how we
That's how we know.
came to be cousins. But if you had Amy walk across this room,
I couldn't
you
even say
would
it.
you would witness Julia Peterkin.
I could not find any video of her or any recording of her voice. Do you all have that?
Real,
And
real.
you have reel to reel.
But I don't know her.
I don't know how to.
I'm sure it does, but we used to, she used
Well, I'm
to,
Gullah, I saw the spirit.
Yeah.
I'm Gullah.
Okay, Hugela.
we used to have
If
reel to reel.
if you take the time to get drawn into one of her books,
Oh.
I first read her collected short stories when I was in high school, I believe. And it takes you a while to get drawn in.
It does.
Gullah dialect. But once you achieve that or jump that fence, you're able to understand it. And her words, poetry, they draw you in. She painted pictures with her words, and they're so vivid. And I've walked Fort Mott many times with a shotgun in my hand and a dog by my side when I was young. And I know that feel you said. When you touch that dirt,
Right.
you'll never forget the smell of it. When you go to the cotton gin or the soybean barn and you jump in soybeans that are neck deep.
Don't go any deeper.
It's a life I wish everybody could experience.
The taste of the food.
Tom grew up
These,
from Bravo,
these,
so
these
you're about to-
were young girls when I grew up. Amy and Emily, the twins, and then Laura came along much later, and gorgeous little blonde-haired thing, and running around. And
What is your name?
Tom Horrell.
Okay.
My mother
Where's-
was a Chandler, Genevieve Wilcox Chandler's daughter,
Okay.
and
And your mom worked at Brook Green.
at Brook
Oh,
Green.
wow.
My grandmother did as well. But back to getting drawn into Julia Peterkin's work, if you allow yourself that moment to jump that fence and
They're hilarious.
you'll be blessed.
Yeah, I feel that way. I just want to soak it up. She has a great sense of humor. Let me tell you, sense of humor that. So, here's one of the scenes. So they're having a revival, and the past preachers coming from elsewhere. And they've spent a lot of time making lemonade, because not necessarily ice and lemons, making lemonade for afterward, punch bowl. So one of the women in the congregation sneezed and her dentures went into the punch bowl. And the preacher has got big eyes, and the way she wrote about it, they would rise up and smile at you, then they'd disappear. And they'd rise up, and then finally they got them out, but nothing else was going to happen to that. They were going to drink that lemonade. And the preacher refused it, and he was not well appreciated after that. Then this is kind of a tragic one. So one of the characters in the book heard if you put fish meal with your seed, it will make it grow. It's wonderful fertilizer. So I think that's Black April. Put fish seed, he would put a catfish in with along the way as he's planting the seed corn. Well, dogs came up and dug that up, and then the birds pecked away the seeds, so then they had nothing. This is a land of hog cholera. There's one account of a wild hog goring one of Julia's horses. I mean, there's just really, there's stories about losing limbs to a sawmill or a cotton gin. So, and those things did happen. Jimmy, would you close us out with one more?
Since we're ending summer, I'll begin with I'll do a thing about summer.
And you're going to do Gullah, right?
No. I can read it, I just won't speak it. I'm not qualified. Chapter 11. Summer's time was out, yet it tarried stubbornly on the plantation. The deceitful season had fooled everything into striving for the utmost growth and fruitfulness, and now, when harvest time had come and cooler nights and paler days would bring a gentle ripening, summer hung on, though, ruining everything it had wrought. The cotton leaves were wilted and hanging limp, no longer able to hide the tight-packed bolls or to shade the tender new squares and late blossoms from the scorching sun. The pheasant rustling of corn blades had changed to a harsh, complaining crackling as the fodder was slowly withered. The roads cast upon sullen clouds of red-hot dust to hang between them and the sky, and quiet little shady paths puffed up breaths of dry mold if the lightest footstep were laid on them. Instead of scratching for worms and hunting tender seeds to fatten themselves for the fall laying season, the fowls sprawled under the houses, panting through open beaks, holding their wing feathers far out from the down on their breasts. The birds left the high trees and went to stay near the water streams, singing blithely enough into the dawn, leaving the days silent after the sun swallowed up the dew. The sky lifted far and high and far away. The tall pines stood still against it, every needle shining in the sun, and moaning softly with the slightest stir of the hot air. The old oaks shielding the cabin's roofs from the burning sun must have sunk their roots deep into the ground to reach moisture, for their leaves stayed glossy and green, and the long moss hanging from their branches kept its fresh grayness. The people in the quarters gave up sleeping in beds, and they spread quilts on the floors beside open doors and windows. Even if snakes and bugs and spirits walked into the darkness, the risk must be faced to get whatever coolness the night would bring. The river was shrunken, the lakes were dry, the clouds moved overhead white and empty. The water in the rice fields lay as smooth as ice and as silent as death as the tides kept it rising and falling. The air drifted in heavy scented with withered cotton blossoms, shriveled figs, grapes falling off the vine to waste. Mary was unhappy, restless, disturbed, uncertain what to do. She must make up her mind to something, for she could not go on any longer pretending she did not feel things that were breaking her heart. Even the plantation seemed different. Those hot fields spread out before her eyes looked silent and cruel. They offered her no hope for better things, no way of escaping her sorrow.
But she does take her life in her own hands, and she manifests her courage and boldness. Thank you all for coming. I'll be here. I don't want to overstay my welcome. Thank you, Jimmy. And Benny, will you come say? And again, I thank the South Carolina Humanities. When I proposed this, they picked up on it really fast. This is the third time I've given this presentation.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank